Once again, thank you very much, everybody, for coming to tonight's community information meeting. Tonight, the King County Sheriff and a panel will present on the public camping ordinance, law enforcement in Burien, and also the role of social services in enforcing a public camping ordinance and managing issues related to homelessness. We have until 6:50 p.m. For this meeting tonight, and we do have a hard stop at 6:50 p.m. What's going to happen here is that each of our panelists will present on different topics. While they are presenting, if a question comes to you, maybe a question has already come to you, I'd like you to go ahead and write the question down on the index card that you've been provided. If you run out of index cards, just go ahead and raise your hand. And Under Sheriff Anderson, who's waving his hand in the back of the room over there, or Chief Kang, who's raising his hand over there, will bring you another card. If for some reason you don't want to wait for them to come forward, we certainly have more cards in the back. We also have a supply of pens. During the presentations, again, if a question comes to mind, just go ahead and raise your card, and one of the two of them will come by and collect the cards. All right, with that said, we're going to go ahead and turn the floor over to Sheriff Cole-Tindall. Sheriff Cole-Tindall.
Hello everyone, I want to thank you as well for this evening. So let's talk a minute about why we decided to host this meeting with your community. We have not had an opportunity to do that, to talk about what we are doing here in the city of Burien, and I felt it was time and it was important to be able to share that and have an opportunity for you to ask us specific questions. So that's why we decided to host this meeting in the city to actually talk about what the King County Sheriff's Office is doing here. I just want to let everybody know, the Sheriff's Office, we cover all of unincorporated King County. We also have contracts with 12 cities that contract with us for police services. We also police for Metro Transit, Sound Transit, the King County Airport, and we also police for the Muckleshoot Tribe. We have quite a large service area, and the city of Burien is also one of those contract cities. The city contracts with us for police services. Tonight, the panel is myself. We have Burien Police Chief Ted Bowe, King County Sheriff's Office mental health professional Susie Kroll. We have Lisa Daugaard, who is with the service provider Purpose, Dignity, and Action, and LEAD, which is law, we need to stay focused, please, otherwise we're not going to be able to get through the presentation, and I really want everybody to get the information. So, Erin Burkhalter is with Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion, so I want to thank all of the panel for coming tonight. So let's talk about how we got here. And just so everybody knows, as I came to the city of Burien today, as I do each week, I drive through the city to see what it looks like, to see the tents. I've spoken with some business owners when I was out here, it was like 3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago. They came out and spoke with me. So I did get an update with my own eyes to see what's happening here in Burien. So, in the fall, the city and county were working together before the city adopted Ordinance 827. And that ordinance, we were enforcing. So what that ordinance was, is we would, if people were camping, by 6 a.m., they would have to pack up, and they would vacate the downtown core. And by 7 p.m., if there was no place for them to be housed, they could set up a tent again. So we were enforcing that every single day. And some people were getting placements. We were also, with social service providers, getting folks resources. Then, in March, the city, Burien Police Department we learned that the council wanted to and did repeal ordinance 827, and they replaced it with a new ordinance, which is the one that I take exception to. And that ordinance is 832. In my opinion, and the opinion of our county's legal counsel, there was a substantive difference between the two ordinances. And so that is what raised the issue. And I, not an attorney, but as the law enforcement, the sheriff in this county, the person who's responsible for the deputies and the officers who enforce the laws here in this county, I needed to get clarification around that new ordinance 832. So I did file a complaint in federal court, and we are awaiting that decision. Now, we also know that the Supreme Court heard on April 22nd a broader issue about the House, the issue with Grants Pass, and we don't know when a decision will come, but it will probably be later, maybe midsummer. We don't know. And that could be why the judge who's assigned our case is not making a decision right now. They want to see what is the outcome. But why did I file that? Why do I think it's unconstitutional? Well, the way that we interpret the ordinance from Burien, the one that's in play now, is we would be asked, we're being expected to arrest these people who are living in a tent. But the city canceled their contracts with their social service providers. Also, there isn't bona fide housing, offers of housing to these folks. So where are they supposed to go? And in our evaluation of the federal Ninth Circuit case law, we cannot do that. We cannot arrest somebody because they are living outside. We have to be able to show that there's been a connection of services and a true bona fide offer of housing. So that's what raised the question. That's when I instructed my deputies on March 8th not to enforce that part. We are doing everything else. We are enforcing all of their laws. City of Burien, out of all of our contracts, accounts for 37% of our calls for service. We are arresting people. We are fighting crime in this city. And so I know I've heard and I've read people feeling that we aren't doing anything. And so part of this meeting is to share with you what we are doing.
We need to, please keep the comments down. Again, this is a community information meeting. It's important to get the information out as well. Thank you.
It was not amended. Actually, right in the ordinance, if you read it, it says right there, 827 is repealed. So we follow the words, and that's why we are where we are. But I thank you all for coming tonight. I hope we can have a civil conversation, and I'd like to introduce Chief Bo.
It was really fun watching Patti walk in today. I know that there's people here who have very strong feelings both ways on this issue. And I think it's really cool how many of you shook my hand and gave me a hug. Whether you agree or disagree with different issues, you realize it's not about the people, it's about figuring out complex issues and working together. And I appreciate that. That's what I love about this town. I've been here for 6 years. I've been a police chief. I've been part of this community off and on for 24 years at various parts of my law enforcement career. I'm not really good at reading notes, but I'm going to try to look down because I want to make sure I hit some of the talking points and don't put myself in trouble by getting off track here. I want to talk a little bit about how we police in Burien. Long before I talk about the campaign, I want to talk about how we do everything in Burien. We focus on 3 different things. Fighting crime. That is our primary job, is fighting crime. Implementing trends and crime behaviors in our community. How we do that is by building trust with all of our partners. We work together with people to make sure that it's a trust-based relationship in how we fight crime. There's not a moment in time I will tell people not to arrest people for criminal behavior, not to take people to jail for criminal behavior, not to do their job. I also believe that trust is an important factor in how we go about doing our job. And a lot of that is about the partners that we work with to implement change in behavior. The third piece, which is going to come into play here tonight as we talk a little bit about some of these issues, is I have to support the men and women that work with me. We must support our people. I cannot put officers in honorable positions just to do it because it's what we want to accomplish or because we want to get something done. I have to make sure that they're in a position where they have tools, resources, training, and I can defend their actions. Those are non-negotiable. They're things we have to do for our people. I want to be clear about one thing because I've heard this a lot. I am not a fan of people living unhoused in our community in the manner in which they're not serviced in that environment. I don't think it's manageable long term. I don't think it's a solution. I don't think what's going on downtown right now is a solution. A lot of people are personalizing this, that there's some belief that I think this is a good thing. I do not think this is a good thing. I think it's a problem that we have to work together to resolve. Those are very different answers to that question. I also want to talk a little bit about tents. These are not a new thing. When I first came here, we had a large tent encampment at the old annex. There was a substantial group there, and the way we worked that through was we brought a bunch of people into a room and we worked together. We talked about the problem, we brought into the room people we don't agree with, people who don't see the problem the same as us, and we worked the problem together. We focused on the problem and the resolution, and that's how we cleared up the annex property 5-6 years ago. We have done this over and over and over again. We bring in a group of subject matter experts in a room, we communicate, we coordinate, and then we execute a plan. That is the way we have done it every single time. That methodology works because we make sure that you're looking at a complex issue and bring all the partners to the table. That will help us resolve some of these complex issues. I'm going to talk a little bit about stats. And I'm going to tell you, first of all, I hate stats. You'll know I don't live and die by stats. Stats are a sucker's bet. Because if I give you stats that show you crime is down, and you don't like that, you'll give me an example of a time where there was a crime that you know occurred, and you use that to say that your lived experience is different than the facts. Conversely, if you like stats, you will throw them at everybody's face at the gospel of all things and ignore the fact that people have real feelings about crime. There are two factors in crime. You have the real crime, the stats, the data, the numbers. That is very scientific and very factual. You also are all human beings. You have a heart, and you have an emotion, and you have feelings. The fear of crime is every bit as real as the statistics. When those two things are not aligned, you have a bunch of conflict in your community. If you feel uncomfortable or unsafe, there's no level of facts I'm going to give you that will make you feel safe. The reason why I tell you this is I'm going to give you some stats now, and those who don't like them are going to instantly tell me about the crime they experienced, or saw, or heard of, or read in the paper, and they're going to tell me those facts are wrong. But I want you to hear them. It's important when we make plans. They're science-based, they're fact-based, and that we also acknowledge human emotion. I have to balance both of those things in my discussion with the community. So here's the actual facts. 2023, okay? I'm going to clarify. Our stats are all sent to WASPE. I don't make my stats, I don't create my stats. They're standardized statewide, they're sent to WASPE. Who reviews them, validates them, and then produces them back for us. So these are validated by a third party. It's the accepted methodology by the Washington State Legislature for every community in the state of Washington. It's not my stats, it's not my rules, it's the standardized methodology. 2023 saw a 7% reduction in all crimes against people. 7% reduction in all crimes against property, and a 9% increase in the category that's called crimes against society. That 9% increase is driven by a 65% increase in your officers enforcement of drug laws in the city of Green. We increased our enforcement of drug laws substantially in a year. If you take out our on-view or enforcement of drug laws, there's a 19% reduction in crimes against society in that same year. So, 2024 year to date, I pulled the stats just this morning. Another 2% reduction in crimes against people. Another 14% reduction in crimes against property, and a 311% increase in crimes against society, driven by a 639% increase in drug enforcement. We have already arrested more people for drugs in the city of Burien this year than we did in all of last year. A lot of people say you're not enforcing the law. That is a lie. I will just tell you right now that's not true. Your officers are enforcing the law every single day in the city. Some people go to jail, some people get cited, some people get referred to lead, some people get transferred to a hospital for medical reasons, but we are enforcing the law every single day in the city here. We have a direction from the sheriff that has just been presented to all of you to enforce every available law outside of the one that is at fault or at conflict right now, and we're doing it. I just want to talk a little bit about, somebody asked me a while ago, they said, who do you serve? And the person who asked me was being intentionally snarky, but it was kind of a fair question, because the implication was I served either the sheriff or the city. That it's binary, it's one or the other, and it's not anything else. You must pick. I will tell you that I'm not a computer. I will not make binary decisions, and it is way more complex than that. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about who I serve. I started serving the sheriff. At the end of the day, she is my boss. I absolutely have an obligation to serve the sheriff. I have to follow the policies that she sets for our agency and for every single agency across King County and all of the deputies across King County. I serve the city. I have a weekly one-on-one where the city manager tells me what he wants me to accomplish that week. I have to work with the city manager. We are a form of government for which I don't directly serve the council, but by default, the council employs the city manager. So fundamentally, yes, I absolutely serve the city. In serving the city, I have to serve every one of you. As you will notice in this room, some of you guys feel one way and some of you feel the other on this issue. Serving you is not an easy monster, I will be honest. You guys all have a different opinion about complex issues, and that is beautiful and good. I have served my officers. I said before, I will not put my officers in a position where I can't protect their actions. That means when something goes bad, they have a use of force. I have to be able to check the box that they were legally in the correct position where they should have been to start. It is not fair for me to tell an officer to do something if I will not support them when it goes bad. I won't do it. If I'm not relieved by that, I totally accept that. I will not do it. It's not negotiable. I serve my family and my faith. It is my job. I go home at the end of the night. Those are important. And when you look at all these things, the answer is all of the above need to be served. They can't be served at the expense of the other. I cannot serve the sheriff at the expense of my officers. I can't serve the city at the expense of my family and my faith. Can't do it. And when they all align, it's easy. Super easy. When the decision is obvious, you can stand here and do my job all day long. It's when they don't align. You can't pick one over the other. I will challenge you to look back in history at the moment where picking one over the other is a moment of pride in our history. I challenge you. It's not. It will not be a moment of pride. So don't do it. Instead, look at all of these things and find the best answer. Not the answer that serves one or the other in a binary sense, but what serves everybody. That's what we do here at Burien. And the last thing we talk about, a little bit about how we do creative policing. I am a believer in bringing everybody into the room. I'm a believer that cops are best served when they have mental health professionals right by their side. I believe that we are best served when experts in treatment and addiction advise me, instead of me pretending I'm an expert in treatment and addiction, I am not. If you ask me where the housing is tonight, I'll tell you I don't know. But I got a guy who does. That's the way I treat law enforcement in Burien, is bringing people into the room and bringing them to the table. So, we're gonna hear from a couple of those people tonight. I will tell you, I don't know it all. I literally make phone calls. A lot of y'all in this room who've got a phone call or a text from me saying, I don't know what to do. That's actually, in my mind, a sign of good leadership, is to ask the questions from the people who know the answer. So, with that said, I will step aside. I know I've exploded my 10 minutes. Anybody who knows me knows I'm capable of staying inside a timeline, so I will go sit down.
So just as a reminder, you have 3x5 index cards. Please take a moment. If you have a question right now, go ahead and write it down. Either the undersheriff or Chief Kang will come down and pick up the cards. And we're going to go ahead and move on now to the human services providers. We're going to start off with our mental health professional, Susie Kroll from DCSO. Susie.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Susie Kroll, and I'm a licensed mental health professional here in the state of Washington. I have to first acknowledge the fact that each and every one of you is here and is committed to your community, whichever side of the line you fall. And to that, I say there is power and there is grace, so that we can accomplish the same goals and get the right people the help they need from the right people to provide it. My role at the King County Sheriff's Office is twofold. First, I was hired to try out this newfangled idea of co-response. So way back in 2016, another contract city of the agency took on the idea of partnering a cop and a counselor. I can tell you almost a decade ago, it was met with some skepticism, to put it lightly. It was met with more suspicion than really support. Now, I'm looking at having set up 8 co-response programs within King and Snohomish County, and the Sheriff's Office hiring to build out the therapeutic response unit. So not only is it going to augment what Chief Bo has done with partnering with professionals in Burien with deputies to provide that level of social services expertise, care, and evaluation, but the Sheriff's Office has made a very strong commitment to build that out agency-wide. Where those resources don't exist is where our emphasis is and will be, to make sure that we are meeting the diverse, complex, heartbreaking, soul-touching, necessary human need with the right experts at the right time. That is role 1 for our agency and for the communities that we serve. My second role is to provide the best information in an advisory capacity for what behavioral health, substance abuse, and mental health treatment looks like in the landscape of King County. Whether the crisis is somebody suicidal in the community, whether it's how they present to an inpatient agency, what it looks like when somebody needs involuntary treatment, what it looks like when somebody walks up to an officer or a deputy or a mental health professional and says, I need help, but I don't have a clue where to go. Or when any one of you reach out and say, somebody I love dearly that I'm so invested in is sick and I am clueless about where to go and what the next steps are. The Sheriff's Office has a deep commitment to making sure we're bridging those gaps in a build-out of a co-response program agency-wide and to bring in that level of specialty. And what you'll see in the augment of that process is something called a response continuum, where we recognize that this is not a one-size-fits-all option. If it were, we would not all be sitting here. And that we recognize in that complexity, we want to meet those needs. So in instances where we see that somebody is just needing a connection to a food bank or a working wardrobe situation for a job interview, that isn't a law enforcement engagement situation. We are going to engage our care teams and our community-based response teams and our social service agencies because they are the experts. If we fall into the window of calls where law enforcement needs to be called, somebody's shoplifting, somebody's trespassing, somebody needs a welfare check, where law enforcement has to be in those instances, we want a mental health professional with them. So that whether or not there's criminal accountability for something, it doesn't preclude that individual from getting the social services help they need. I will help that person in the beginning when they're first the touch point with law enforcement, in the middle of what's going on, and if I can't do it that way, me and my team will meet them afterwards to make sure they get the service connections. So for us, it's not a choice that you either are to jail, to the hospital, you get help, or you don't get help. We find a way to have both things occur at the same time. And that's how I've seen, through the course of my career as a mental health professional, those complex issues get solved. Because we're willing to do the awkward, uncomfortable, tough work of finding solutions and meeting each person from the place that they stand in with some dignity, with some respect, and most important for me in my unit's development, with the power of participation in the process. I don't ever want to be the type of mental health professional, nor does anyone on my team, to walk in and say, I believe you have this diagnosis, I believe this is your issue. This shall be the resource that you go to, end of discussion. I want to know, and I want to hear that person advocate for what their needs are as well, which is why the Sheriff's Office and the Therapeutic Response Unit has a continuum of types of response and social services that we'll engage with in order to best match the needs and the desires of the person we're wanting to help, and not have that one single touch point and be done with the interaction, but to also foster through that person's growth, recovery, and development throughout their touch points in whatever communities we serve. And for everyone's edification here, we want to be that resource for the questions, for the concerns, for your friends, your family, your neighbors, for the people that you see in the community that need the help. And it's my hope, and a final thought, that when you do reach out to the therapeutic response unit, you are met with kindness and compassion. You are met with dignity and grace. And then you are met with at least a pathway towards someplace better than you currently stand. And you are armed with information to better make a decision about how you feel about certain treatment recovery processes, and view, no matter what side of the line you stand on, this is a partnership to a shared goal of overall community wellness. Thank you.
Thank you, MHD Kroll. Again, if you have index cards, please hold your hand up, and either Chief King or Sheriff Anderson will be by to pick them up. All right, the next presentation we have, I'm going to go ahead and introduce both of them together. We have Daugaard from Purpose, Dignity, and Action, also shortened as PDA. And then we also have Burkhalter from Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion, also called LEAD. So Lisa.
Thank you. Oops, can you hear me? We're going to be 5 minutes each, so we're just going to stay seated if that's okay. So we both work for PDA, and we both work with the LEAD project management team. But I'm going to start by talking about some overarching themes, and Erin will talk about sort of granular data about our work here in Burien. LEAD is a strategy for working on crime that relates to behavioral health issues and poverty, and evades a quick and easy solution. People tend to cycle through the criminal legal system if there's not a deeper intervention. We know that. Many of us have lived through that, going back some years. So starting in 2018, the city of Burien entered into a voluntary partnership with our office, with King County, and with Burien community partners to launch LEAD, which is always a voluntary project. Nobody's required to do it. But I think you'll see there's a theme here of partnership, leveraging additional resources for the community, and that was the concept in 2018, was that the county would fund it and we would project manage it. The city sort of provided the in-kind resources of the police department and the city prosecutor, and that together we could do a deeper response than had been available in the past to people who committed low-level crimes related to mental illness, substance use, and poverty. So LEAD is based on, it's an evidence-based approach that's aligned with the SAMHSA, I'll say what that stands for, definition of recovery. SAMHSA is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. It's a federal agency that focuses on behavioral health care. And the working definition that SAMHSA uses for recovery defines recovery as a process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness, live self-directed lives, and strive to reach their full potential. Recovery signals a dramatic shift in the expectation for positive outcomes for individuals who experience mental and substance use conditions, or the co-occurring of the two. The guiding principles that SAMHSA provides are important, and I'm going to take the time to read them, because you'll notice that it's multi-layered and protracted, and that's really the takeaway that I hope to leave you with. SAMHSA says the process of recovery is highly personal and occurs via many pathways. It may include clinical treatment, medications, faith-based approaches, peer support, family support, self-care, and other approaches. Recovery is characterized by continual growth and improvement in one's health and wellness and managing setbacks. Because setbacks are a natural part of life, resilience becomes a key component of recovery. And they list 4 dimensions of recovery, one of which pertains to health, including behavioral health, which can include, but they do not say must include, abstaining from illicit or non-prescribed medications or alcohol, if that is the person's problem. having a home, a stable and safe place to live, because not having one is undermining of recovery. Having a purpose, having meaningful connection and hope for having impact in a meaningful life, and having community and meaningful relationships. So LEAD is, and Erin will talk more about that program, LEAD is a process of identifying people who are likely to commit crimes related to behavioral health or poverty, and intervening either after a crime is committed or ideally when there's a past pattern, but before there's a new crime committed, to reduce the chance of future crime. So that's what we were doing in 2018 and 2019. In 2020, and I just tell this story because it's so important to our philosophy of, you don't just keep doing something because that's what you do. We're trying to solve problems, and when problems change or they require new strategies, it's our job to work together to find them. So in April of 2020, we know this because we were working with law enforcement elsewhere in the region and in the country, but Burien Police Department was the only law enforcement agency that we knew of that actually tried to be proactive about the worsening conditions that were going on during the early COVID period. And Chief Bo placed for me somewhat challenging phone call where he was like, well, what are we gonna do? Like, there's people living in the park, and we have a rule against people living in the park, which was the law in Burien at that time. And I know that it's kind of crazy conditions, but we do not intend to surrender that law. So can you help? Old LEAD, the sort of LEAD 1.0, isn't an immediate solution to people living unsheltered because we don't have housing, and we didn't then have access to shelter. But we did recognize that that was what the community needed at that time, and that's certainly what BPD was saying. So we went to the county and proposed that we repurpose our funding to create temporary shelter, which was not in Burien because you didn't have hotels, but we created non-congregate shelter for people who were living in Burien parks in other cities. And then we created an intensive case management team to help people there. And just, I want to make this point and then pass to Erin, that kind of inherent in the challenges in working in this area is that when we're successful, the people that we were successful with, you no longer see, right? But I do want to call your attention, I feel really confident of this fact, that from April of 2020 until the fall of 2021, so 18 full months during which that project was funded by COVID relief funding that came through the county, there was nobody living in Burien parks, or at least no one living there that we didn't come and get immediately. And people said yes, because what we were offering fit their situation, and they did not come back to Burien parks. One of the things we learned through that experience was the resources that are needed to accomplish that. And I think that rings true, right, to what is needed now. That was the same kind of impact that folks would like to see. But because of the wind down of COVID relief funding, those resources were no longer present. I want to end with a happy note that is, again, a story of sort of partnership generating resources. King County has just procured a small but important short-term shelter or lodging program for people with behavioral health issues coming from King County's diversion programs, including LEAD. We proposed to that. We were one of two groups that were awarded that funding, and we asked if we could devote the first sort of round to Burien, and they have just decided that yes, we can. So we will be able to offer placements to about 15 people here coming up in the next month or two. So that is not something none of us could do on our own, but together we should be able to find a path for at least 15 people. Erin.
It's hard to follow up on that. My name's Erin Burkhalter. I want to tell you a little bit about LEAD and share some numbers, and then I want to share some success stories. I'm going to start with like 3 things that I love about LEAD and I love about my job, and one is that this is my home. My older kid goes to high school right there. My younger kid performs on this stage with the Highliners, so this is a very important place to me. I also love this because of who we work with. If you looked at kind of like our initial founding documents of how we come to lead, you'll see faith leaders, city leaders, law enforcement, prosecutors, a number of levels, business leaders. I know I'm missing people, and being able for us to work in that cross section and be here side by side with people from all of those spaces has been really important to this work. And then the last thing that's I would say that I really love about this work is what we call the OWG, or Operations Work Group. And this is when we get together and we actually look at our active clients that we're working with, and we try to problem solve. And you have law enforcement in the room, you have prosecutors from the city and the county in the room, you have case management in the room, and we're all talking about and trying to do these things. And what's really magical about it is not only are we talking about the benefit of what do we do for the client, but everyone's speaking for their own agency as well. People are coming forward and saying, I hear that you want this for the client, but I am accountable to my agency, to my institution as well. And how are we going to resolve this problem to meet my needs for my institution and also what you're looking for this client? Those are really special meetings, and again, there's not always agreement, but there is a lot of commitment to living with the disagreement and living with the tension. We've had 145 active clients since the program began. Our current number is 104 that we have right now. The discrepancy where you see with that is people move on to other things, move on to better things. Some people move into housing outside of Burien, and so their case management ends up being transferred elsewhere. Some people move out of the area for any number of reasons. The people that we work with have a variety of needs. We try to look up and down: behavioral health, housing, medical, what are all of the things, and helping people address those to figure out which things are preventing them from being able to advance in their goals and advance in the community's goals as well for what it's looking for. So that person could be here for a short period of time, or the longest period of time we've had is someone with us for 4 years, 10 months, and 9 days. That's on the far end of it. 82% of these people, at least last year, we haven't been able to crunch the numbers for the next quarter yet, are enrolled in behavioral health services. Substance use treatment and behavioral health treatment. So it's not just housing, it's treatment, it's all of the above. And what I find really special about it is the services support each other and make the other services more possible and make them work better. I want to give a couple, just 2 success stories. One is a recent person that case management referred to as a high flyer. So someone who was really well known in the community and had a lot of criminal justice treatment, or criminal justice engagement. They're doing treatment now, and they also recently got housing. And the reason we wanted to highlight this person is since January when they were housed, they have not had any further law enforcement encounters. The other is someone who had been with the program for a very, very long time. And I like to talk about this person because of the significant community impact. Depending on where he was located, he would start amassing a large pile of garbage, furniture, just things that he'd kind of collected from around the area at various locations along and near First Avenue in particular. When law enforcement and one of the biggest champions of the LEAD program from law enforcement brought him to us and a strong believer in the program, he was not feeling confident about this person being successful in the program. And it did take some time, and it did take a lot of work. He's a really good, interesting case example because he did eventually get housing inside of Seattle. And we saw something we very commonly see with the people that we work with is they get into housing and then they're back in Burien again, and they're on the street corner, or they're at the park, or they're at the transit center, whatever that location is most familiar to them are. And that's when we start hearing from law enforcement saying, well, what's going on with this guy? Well, I thought he had housing. It takes work and it takes ongoing case management to not only help people get into housing, but maintain the housing and find themselves comfortable in that space, be able to see that as their home and be able to maintain that location. Because the housing is so rare, you don't want to lose that opportunity when it's happened. I think that's all I comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just before I turn it over to the facilitator so we can get your questions, I just want to say one other thing. So as a law enforcement officer, we take an oath. We take an oath to the U.S. Constitution, the state of Washington, and the county of King. We have to be careful about how we enforce laws. We have to have legal authority. Because if we don't, at least in this state, there's no qualified immunity. There is no protection for police officers, so I don't ever want to put my folks in a situation where they could potentially be violating somebody's rights that would then cause them to, A, perhaps lose their certification, which means they can't work and they can't support their family. So that I just wanted to say, I didn't say that earlier because that is important. As a law enforcement officer, we just can't do what somebody tells us to do if we don't believe we have legal authority. So now we're going to take questions.
Thank you very much, Sheriff. And thank you very much, panel. I really appreciate you going through and sharing those thoughts and with the community. Before I continue, again, if you've got any cards that you filled out a question on, please go ahead and again raise your hand, and either the Undersheriff or Chief King will come by and pick them up. All right, the first question then is for Susie. What would you consider, or somebody else, what would you consider is the best way to deal with homeless with mental illness?
That question is incredible and it is vast. There is no one-size-fits-all solution, but I think it needs a combination of things to be present to have something work. And I can speak to this from my own therapeutic process and how I worked with clients prior to working in a co-response field. We encounter people on a daily basis in a client-therapist situation that have a concern or a problem or an issue that is perplexing for that individual or presenting some sort of challenge. It may be due to the fact that they have trauma in their backgrounds, abuse, violence, a lack of resources, no solid family of origin in their upbringing, or have dealt with any other adverse childhood experience. And it is shaping how that individual is engaging as an adult. So how do I think the best way to deal with mental health should work, or what illness could look like, would be one, to consider that the folks that we may encounter don't necessarily have the skills, nor have they been taught the ability to function in potentially a rule-governed society, where there are obligations to landlord-tenant law, or following medication regimes, or going through therapy and following that process. So it's incumbent on the people that have that skill set to be able to impart that knowledge and be able and willing to do it in a way that is, 1, therapeutic, 2, compassionate, 3, trauma-informed and takes into account that upbringing, and that also empowers the individual to say, I don't like the outcomes I'm seeing right now for myself, and you're giving me a pathway to change my outcomes, and you're giving me the skill set to learn to make different choices so I get my positive outcomes rather than my negative consequences. So can I snap my fingers and wish this away? Man, do I ever. We wouldn't have jobs and it would be utopia. But the best way for me to manage mental health issues is to recognize and help somebody identify a problem, take into account where that problem is coming from, and having them be a solid piece of that autonomy and decision-making for how that works, and help guide them through the process of making different choices and engaging different services to get a desired outcome rather than a negative consequence.
Thank you. The next question is for the Sheriff. Why is Burien's ordinance unconstitutional and CTAC is not?
So, thank you for that question. It's not apples to apples, it's apples to oranges. Let's talk about how it's apples to oranges. Okay? So 1, CTAC does not have a downtown core. SeaTac also doesn't have the encampment that we have here. SeaTac doesn't have a map that Burien's ordinance created, the map that wasn't legislated and can be changed without notice to the community. So somebody wouldn't know day to day where they can legally, appropriately set up their camp, their tent. So that is a key difference. Additionally, City of SeaTac provides vouchers for housing, and SeaTac has resources, a list of resources, and they've not made one arrest related to somebody who is in intent. So they contact that person, they communicate with them, and it's addressed, it's handled. So it is not apples to apples.
Thank you, Sheriff. Next question, Chief Bowe. Are there plans to increase the budget to increase both community and commissioned officers?
I think it's great that the council meeting starts in exactly 1 hour and 15 minutes, and I think this is on the agenda tonight. It is a discussion around what do we need to add to the city's budget as far as officers are concerned, but also holistically viewing what does the city need to add. I don't want to overly speak on behalf of the city manager or council, but I will tell you that we are not a well-resourced city. That is the reality of Burien. We have several current or former council members in here that will tell you that every year budget is a difficult decision. It is, do we close the park to add this? Do we do this to add this? It's not like there's a surge or a surplus of money. So I think that is our challenge here in the city. I know that as they're looking at adding, they're looking at not only adding police officers, but also adding other things that we desperately need. We need public maintenance workers. We need people in the park system. We need maintenance for our parks. So I think they're looking at all of those options, and ultimately it's a council decision to kind of decide how they want to shape that.
Thank you. Then this goes to our social service providers, perhaps. So PDA and LEAD. How many people in Burien did you get in treatment in the last year? Okay, here, folks, I understand this is a contentious issue.
Aaron,
Sorry, go ahead.
Please hold. We need to make certain we keep the comments down. The intent of this meeting is to get information to the public. While some of you may have a different perspective of things, we honor that, we respect that. But while we're in here, we need to make certain we get information to folks. So out of respect for those people that are here to listen and to learn, I ask the people with your opinions and different reactions you'd like to share to please keep them to yourselves for now so we can get the information out and so that others can decide how they feel about the situation. Thank you. Please go ahead. Thank you.
So Aaron partially answered this in his presentation, but it's 82% of 104, so I think that is 83, 82 or 83 people.
All right, thank you. Anything else on that topic? All right, thank you. Sheriff, why was the camping ordinance enforced up until last month?
Well, because 827, the previous ordinance, which has been repealed, we were enforcing. But the change was an emergency. I was not consulted. We were not allowed or given the opportunity to interact with the city. I think if we could have done that, we could have pointed out the issues that we saw with it and maybe come up with something that was appropriate that could be enforced. So the city, by emergency, passed that ordinance, and that's what necessitated me to instruct our deputies. I have issues with that ordinance. I'm not sure it's constitutional because I don't know if it is or not. That's why we went to a federal judge to tell us.
Thank you, Sheriff. I think this one might go to Chief Bowe. How do you protect small businesses? Also, how can the regular residents feel safe? Because I don't.
Yeah, I think we kind of talked a little bit about what crime trends mean versus the fact that we're an urban community with real crime. That is a reality. I will never tell you we're a crime-free community. I will never tell you that we don't have crime in our community. I will tell you that if you look at our crime related to other communities in South King County, we're on par with the communities around us. We're not an outlier. There's a council member here from another city in South County that stopped in and introduced himself on the way in to say, I really want to hear this because we're struggling in our city with all the same issues you are. This is not unique to Burien, what we're going through. I will tell you that one of the things that causes me personal pain is when people don't feel safe. Feels mean a ton to me. I come here, most of you guys have seen me here, I come here with my family, I wear jeans and a t-shirt, I don't carry a gun, I go to dinner with my family, I spend time in Burien. This is my community too. I haven't missed a Father's Day car show in a long time. These are things that are important to me, is to be part of the community where I work, and I want to feel safe here too. Right now, I think there is a very strong connection between people's discomfort around the unhoused people in the downtown core and their perception of the crime rate in Burien. And I think those things are very much so overlap. And I think the best thing we can do is come together to create a reasonable policy to help that tension come down that we have going on with your feelings versus the statistics. I think that's the best thing we can do. And I'm gonna take a little bit of privilege here on the previous point that the sheriff made. We had an agreed upon plan that we had written up on how we were enforcing 827. And one of the components as your chief of creating plans for law implementation is having the time to run it through legal. We write a plan, we coordinate a plan, we run it through legal and make sure that we're solid on our ability to take action under the plan. Because we have to be able to defend that when an officer's in that position, that their actions are legal. And if it goes bad, and that's what people forget, is that when everything goes good, it's easy. It's when something bad happens. The first checkbox, there's a couple of commanders from other departments in here. When you have a use of force, the very first checkbox, the first thing I have to answer on that use of force that we have to send in and verify with the state commission that we're doing it right is, did that officer have legal standing? That is question one. If I can't answer that, then I can't implement the plan. So I just want to share, as we're talking about 827 versus 832, is we never had a plan that we could submit up and have approved by legal so that we could put our officers in that legal position every single time. Thank you.
Thank you. Sheriff, why did you go straight to a lawsuit instead of connecting with the city of Burien?
Well, when you don't have a situation where you can talk with somebody. So I felt that this wasn't an issue. I did notify the city, but let me tell you the sequence. I instructed the deputies not to enforce the ordinance. That same day, I sent notification to the city manager that I instructed the deputies not to enforce the ordinance. Clearly over that weekend, there was lots of back and forth, lots of things in the media. We couldn't really respond. And so on Monday, I felt like we were not going to be able to have a conversation, a productive conversation. This is not something that I felt we could resolve. So that is why I went that route.
Thank you. So I think this will go to our human services providers, maybe to Susie. What has KCSO done to lower addiction and OD rates? Has there been any decrease in OD addictions in King County?
I can try to attempt to answer that question. I don't have numbers in front of me, but I will speak from this frame of experience. We started 8 co-response programs within King County and Snohomish County, partnering deputies with and officers with mental health professionals. What are we doing to try and decrease the ODs and the behavioral health and substance abuse treatment needs? It is a multifaceted issue where a mental health professional licensed, credentialed in HP has to balance a handful of things. One, King County and Washington State very much protects the civil liberties of people that require or need, or maybe even clinically meet standard for treatment. And we cannot force somebody into that treatment, with the exception of a tiny, narrow window for imminent threat to loss of life. And once we've mitigated that imminent threat, the issue may still persist, but the risk of life loss has been mitigated, then we are back to having that person have their civil liberties preserved enough that they have the ultimate decision-making power as to whether or not they enter treatment. Mental health professionals that co-respond will do their level best to engage in a case management touch point, building rapport and working with individuals to motivate them toward treatment. But oftentimes that may or may not be enough depending on the circumstances. King County proper has instituted the availability of Narcan. I can tell you when I very first was a brand new baby clinician, nobody had ever heard of Narcan and what it could do and how you got it. And over the progression of my ability to provide treatment, it is now in every police car. It's now in every medic bag. And if I pull out my handbag right now, I have a Narcan kit in it as well. So part of that reduction is a huge piece of education and awareness, where to get the safe and the life-saving implements that you may need, i.e. Narcan, and where and how to engage in treatment and what best motivates somebody to get into that treatment. And if I can now take a tiny bit of liberty from that last question about when someone doesn't feel safe, because that comes in large part with a lot of the news and the media coverage for fentanyl overdoses and needles and things that you see. Before I was a mental health professional, I had some really distinct ideas about what mental health was. And some of them were not nice. A lot of them were not trauma-informed, and a lot of them, even more so, were misinformed by what I saw in the media, what my friends and family talked about, what my experience was or wasn't. And when I became a clinician, I had these doors and windows and libraries and books and knowledge bases opened to where what I was worried about and what I was in fear of and what I had judgments about weren't what I thought they were. And there was a huge piece of learning what I didn't know in order to help myself feel empowered and educated. And that helped me feel safer because some of the things that were causing me fear, I didn't need to be worried about. And some of the things that were causing me fear, I could learn more about and then figure out how best to manage those safety pieces. So as the nerdy mental health professional sitting here, there's a big piece for me about fear and feelings, just like Chief Bo talked about. But I also truly believe that if we demystify some of the myths and the concerns and the stereotypes and our own fear and judgment by education, the problem looks a whole lot more manageable when we're not unintentionally compounding it with misinformation or beliefs that we just don't have perspective for until we get it.
Lisa?
Thanks, Susie. Just wanted to add, when the Burien Police Department asked LEAD what we could do to respond to the conditions that were starting to materialize in 2020, that was what we built around. How to recognize, I mean, people were using drugs in encampments. That was the core, right? And that remains the core concern for many people in this community. So we needed to not just provide a place that people would accept to come and live, but we needed the conditions there to be attuned to the fact that people were at very high risk of overdose and were all dealing with substance use disorder. So we literally had doctors on site, and this was early COVID, so there was no vaccine, and people were really extending themselves to come out and do this work. Going in, making sure that all of the medication-assisted treatment programs had shut down, everything was telehealth, so they were bringing a laptop in and promoting telehealth connection for an MAT, medication-assisted treatment prescriber, making sure that that person got their prescriptions, all the way to case managers, really like facilitating people's recovery arc from substance use issues. Requires paying very granular attention to what is the barrier. So I'll just give you my most recent example from our co-lead program that was born here in Burien. A case manager noticing that someone was in the SCORE jail, ready to go to treatment, but he couldn't get out. And we had a treatment bed, but if he couldn't get out, he was gonna lose his treatment bed. So we went, we posted bail, and our case manager drove him to that treatment program. That's what it takes sometimes. You do whatever it takes in order to alleviate whatever the barrier is to people taking that next step. And it could be 50 things, so you do those 50 things.
Thank you. Next question then is, who determines which arrests go to LEAD versus SCORE jail? And what about the people who regularly refuse services for substance abuse disorder? Chief Post.
I'll start with the first one. Officers have discretion when they make an arrest to make a determination what the outcome of that case is. Again, choice is booking, taking somebody to SCORE jail. I want to point out that we're actually really fortunate to have that option. A lot of communities don't actually have that option because King County doesn't take misdemeanor bookings right now. So us having our own facility actually gives us that option, which others don't have. Lead is what's called a warm handoff, where we actually call a service provider. We meet the service provider either in the field or at their office and hand the person to the service provider at the time of or moment of arrest. Our other option is to cite, which is send a citation to the prosecutor, and then the prosecutor files the case. If they fail to show up, they get a warrant for their arrest, and they get booked into score on the warrant. And the other issue I want to be fairly transparent about is that drugs are an ugly, ugly thing. And a lot of people have a lot of medical issues when they have addictions, and that presents a real problem for us on the booking side. If you go to take somebody to jail and they're not medically acceptable at that facility, our option is either to release them with a citation at the hospital or to sit on them because we have to maintain continuous custody if we're going to keep them in our care until booking. And a lot of people have diseases and medical issues from drug addiction that mean it's days or weeks before we can get them into jail. I have to be responsible with the resources of the city. And it's not realistic to sit on somebody on a drug arrest for even 24 hours with law enforcement overtime rights over a singular drug arrest. So that option often becomes a medical transport option where we have to turn them over to medical and just cite them. We still do the enforcement action of referring to the prosecutor, but booking is sometimes not an appropriate option medically as well as therapeutically. Sometimes the best option is try to connect that person with a service provider at the moment. And the second half was when people don't play. Is that correct?
Yes.
I'm going to talk about from the law enforcement end. It's law enforcement discretion. So we talk to people and we have a little script we read that says, do you want to go talk to the service provider today or do you want to go to jail? And some people say, man, today's the day I'd like to think about that. And some days people say other words to us that indicate that they probably would prefer to go to jail. We're here to facilitate that. That's part of our job. I'll give an example of a project we worked on with Safeway a while ago where we did a shoplifting emphasis. And what we did was we worked with loss prevention, and then we had law enforcement officers arrest people when they did the shoplift. And then we also had lead available on site, and we gave people the option right there of, we have a transport car there, we have a case provider there. And I think we arrested 7 or 8 people, and I think 2 of them went to lead and the rest of them went to jail. So it is completely dependent on the program being right for that individual. I don't want to speak for Aaron and Lisa, but one of the things that people think that if you have lead, that's the thing that's the fix everything. It's not. You have to be the right person for which that's the right place for you to go. If that's not the right place for you to go, sometimes jail is the correct place for you to go. Sometimes the hospital is the correct place for you to go. So,
I'll tag one more piece in there about SCORE. Just so you know, SCORE Jail also has mental health professionals on staff. And SCORE actually most recently is one of the highest in the nation for discharging people that have been booked into treatment. So it's not hospital, lead, care, or jail, you get nothing. I can't tell you how often I call the mental health professionals at SCORE and say, hey, this individual's coming in, this is their name, this is the circumstance, can you meet them and talk with them and see if you can encourage them into treatment? So there are many, many levels of trying to get engagement. If they say no to lead, we're going to try and engage them when they're in SCORE. If they say no to SCORE and lead and they end up in the hospital, guess who's on the phone with the ER social worker, still trying to advocate for that client.
And it's such a complex landscape that I will just add to that comment that there is emerging research about how unbelievably harmful it is for people who are in active use to be booked into jail and not be supervised in medical detox. And most jails don't have the capacity to do that appropriately. And there's probably no trauma that would exceed that experience other than like relational trauma. So it's not like, oh, that sounds good, let's just send it. If we don't need to send the person to jail and we can do a warm handoff and immediately start working with the person, and if the officer's discretion is that that's a good call, that's a good call. And we don't agree about this, but they're the boss and they make the decision. I mean, we often agree, but we don't always agree, and that we lose. So.
Okay, next one's for Sheriff. Sheriff, what happens to Burien's law enforcement if the city doesn't pay the contract?
Well, I am oversee the law enforcement in the county. We're still going to be able and will provide police service for the city of Burien. There's a provision that says we can still charge the city if they don't pay. So if we have to go to court to get paid, then I guess that's what we'll have to do. But we are not going to abandon the city and not be there to provide police service, which, I will say, we are providing except for this one ordinance. So that's the answer.
Thank you. Chief Bo, if I see drug activity, should I call the non-emergency number or 911?
So I prefer the non-emergency number. I'm going to give everybody a little secret in the room. Maybe I should turn the media off. They'll go to the same communication center. King County has one communication center. The difference is how your call gets prioritized. So if you dial 911, you get prioritized in front of a non-emergency call. The same person actually answers the phone. It's just a triaging system. And the reason why I say I prefer that use the non-emergency is because if somebody's involved in an event like a shooting or an event like a fight or domestic violence, I would prefer that gets triaged in front of somebody using drugs. There are some rules in the state of Washington, and I say rules, they're actually laws, about what a police officer has to witness in order to make an arrest. So a police officer, 1031-100, we actually have to witness certain crimes occurring in order for us to take action on them. I know a lot of people show me a video of something and say, Chief, I took a video of this thing. I cannot actually, based on a video of somebody smoking something that you believe to be drugs, take law enforcement action, make an arrest based on that. I still have to do an independent investigation to include it's not illegal to have a substance in your body, it is legal to possess the substance. So if somebody has already utilized the substance that you videotaped them using, it's not a crime for law enforcement at that moment in time because they're no longer in possession of the substance. So these are not my rules. This is the state of Washington law. I don't get to make it, but I do have to follow it. Again, in the guise of we have to follow the law constitutionally. We would not have support in arresting somebody on a video of something that's already in their body. It's no longer a crime under the state law.
Thank you. Chief, another one. Is it possible to implement foot patrols in downtown core to support safety in businesses?
Yeah, so I want to start out with talking about, we do actually have a storefront officer. Storefront officer program came into effect about 2020. The funding of that program might be 2021. The funding for that program is COVID relief money. And we transitioned that into a storefront officer with COVID relief money. Same time we did the mental health programs as well. So there is already foot patrols downtown. We also use bicycle patrols downtown. We're probably more fair weather than we'd like to admit, but we tend to do bicycle patrols much more this time of year than we do in the middle of the winter. But there are officers out there riding bikes. We have 2 officers right now, 2 detectives in the crime reduction unit that are focused almost entirely on this issue right now. Most of their work is surrounding addiction, camping in the downtown core. And then we have the storefront officer. We also have our 2 co-responder units that are regularly getting pulled into supporting this as well. So as far as foot patrol, realistically, you have at least 1 person on foot patrol 40 hours a week, and then you have 2 additional officers that are regularly on foot, bike, or vehicle patrolling downtown.
All right, thank you. What is being done, what can be done about people who physically and verbally assault people living on the street? Assaults have included throwing firebombs at tents, invading privacy by videotaping tents, blaring noises at all hours to interrupt people's peace. What can people in tents do?
It's a great question. I talked earlier about who do I serve. This is the thing people often don't like if it doesn't answer the question they want, but I serve the person in the tent just as much as you. They have every bit of the same rights as you. I have the same legal obligations to that individual as I do to the person who's mad about the tent in their neighborhood. This goes the same for if I have somebody in custody. I have exactly the same responsibility to the person in handcuffs in my back seat as I do to the victim of their crime. This is a really hard thing for law enforcement. I have to detach myself emotionally from what I think is right and wrong, for what I think about the person who did that thing or the decisions that led to that act, I have to detach from that and protect everybody's rights equally. I say this because a crime against a person in a tent is a crime, just the same as a crime against a person in your home or your business. There is a level of decorum here that does need to occur when we disagree, that we don't cross those magic lines where we're threatening somebody's well-being, where we are doing things that are outwardly harassing or dangerous. It's a requirement under the law that I honor that person's interests the same as yours. I will say a lot of these people are not willing to call the police because they're terrified of law enforcement, because law enforcement arrests them a lot, and because they have a lot of issues. But if they call us, a crime has occurred, they will get exactly the same treatment as any of you would if you called us and a crime occurred.
Thank you. Another question for Chief Bowe. What is the difference between the law saying no smoking within 20 feet of a business entrance and smoking fentanyl in tents outside of the main entrance of the library? Are you not enforcing this law, Chief Bowe?
I'll start with the first one. I do not work for the Department of Public Health, who enforces smoking outside of business. Police officers don't enforce smoking outside of business door. It's not what we do. Second half of that question, somewhat snarky and baited, is I said earlier, if a police officer witnesses you in possession or use of drugs, you're committing a misdemeanor violation. The officer can make arrest, they can book you, cite you, refer you to lead, or transfer to the hospital. Those options are applicable with somebody using controlled substance in our presence anywhere, anytime. I think, if I remember right, what you asked about during council, many of you come to council, I see lots of friendly faces. You'll notice I regularly get up and go walk outside because I, like you, can smell something I don't want to be smelling or hear something going on outside, and I go outside and deal with it. So I am 100% responsive to, I don't appreciate it any more than you guys do. I don't appreciate it both experiencing it either inside or outside any more than you do.
Thank you. This might go to our human services providers. How available is housing to homeless who do not have either mental illness or addiction?
I mean, the answer is just, it's very unavailable to everybody. The housing supply compared to the unhoused population is a small fraction of the need, and that's why it feels like nothing is happening, right? It is very hard to see the efficacy of housing when it's distributed in an incredibly thin layer over a very broad landscape, and that's what's going on. For permanent supportive housing is directed toward people with disabilities, and that is not exclusively, but primarily people with behavioral health issues. There are other housing resources, for example, in ARPA, I can't remember what ARPA stands for, but what the second COVID relief tranche of federal funding that came through in 2021. There was a major investment in emergency housing vouchers. They became known as EHVs. And it was a great benefit that had not been seen for a long time. It was a 10-year subsidy, and it's possibly renewable. And those were not so limited to people with medical or just disabilities, medical needs or disabilities. And so there was a huge impact of that. And some people who had been waiting for a long time actually got housed. Now that's gone. And conversations about a state or a local version of that are, I think, overdue. I mean, it was so effective, and I believe King County used those EHVs more effectively than any community in the country. So we can, if we have that kind of resource, we can get it out there, we can get people in. Folks are good at what they do, but they don't have anywhere for people to go. And then even more, last point, because it is a pet peeve. Currently, so all homeless housing is distributed through the coordinated entry system, and currently coordinated entry deprioritizes people who are currently in shelters. So when your case manager has a big win and gets somebody into shelter, they're stuck there forever, essentially, unless there's some special arrangement that we can arrange. And that's a terrible use of our sheltering resources. We could use shelters as a place to, okay, I'm just on my soapbox, but we could use shelters as a place to figure out what's really going on with people, where they're going to succeed on a permanent basis, and make sure that their permanent housing resource that they move on to is the right one for them and one that they're going to be able to stay in for a long time. But presently, people just end up kind of dead-ending in the shelter system because they'll never have a high enough priority to get into the permanent housing lottery.
Thank you. As many of you know, as you may know, there are families in Burien who are sheltering a seriously mentally ill adult in their home, keeping them safe. What resources are available to help families when crises occur? As parents get older, they can't do this forever.
I'm happy to take that question. It's something that I see across the board in King County, not just in Burien. That is a nuanced question. I think the theme of the day is complexity. And in each of those instances, what I would offer is to find a co-responding mental health professional or the therapeutic response unit and call when there's no problem. Call and sit down and have a conversation with those case managers, and we can work through mental health advance directives. We can work through guardianships. We can work through trusts. We can work through a plan for safety and imminency and changes in that individual should they have more acute symptomology. We can work on a plan for setting up resources, the type of level of care that they may need, and frankly, potentially some of the funding that may be available depending on insurance coverage. Oftentimes, I get those calls, obviously because I work for a sheriff's department, when something's already gone haywire, and now we're sewing the parachute after we've jumped out of the plane. But I would offer, if that is the circumstance that you or someone that you love finds themselves in, call beforehand and talk with a mental health professional and a case manager, and start laying the footing down for the potential inability to care, for what a trust may look like, what a guardianship may look like, judging about what types of housing would be appropriate, what to do if that person becomes more acute, if they need medication management, if the symptomology changes. Let's build the response plan before the response is needed, and then educate yourself through that system. It's a whole lot less stressful to learn it when there's not a fire happening, and a whole lot more easy to engage in when there isn't an emergency, so that when something does happen, you're ready to go, rather than very fearful and scared.
Thank you. Next question is, we can talk about people's rights, but because I have a business and I need some answers on how to protect my business as a business owner. So I would imagine that would be people sleeping outside the business and damage some business and impacting customers and so on.
Yeah, really open-ended question.
Ma'am, I'm sorry, if I let you speak, then everybody else is going to have the same ability to. So we're going to stick with the way, ma'am, I'm sorry. We're going to keep this with questions on the cards. If this doesn't work, I'm sorry, but we're going to stick with the questions on the cards. So can you talk to us a little bit about, if you're a business owner, what it is that you can do to help protect your business from crime and from people living outside of your business? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to start by saying it is somewhat nuanced. One of the things I encourage you to do is start out with having a SEPTED review, which is having one of our officers especially trained in analyzing your business and saying, where are you vulnerable? It's crime prevention through environmental design. We've sent several officers, as well as our code enforcement officer, to training to know how to analyze your business and reduce the likelihood that you are a victim of a crime. Sometimes some of the most simple things are effective, like lighting changes, landscaping changes. One of the things I like to point out to people is if you go into the retail world, somebody's always folding clothes at the front and says hi to you when you walk through the door. That's actually manipulating your psychology. If somebody makes eye contact and says hello, your likelihood of shoplifting when you're in that business goes down dramatically. So sometimes some simple things to lower your risk are really important. If you get into the bigger issues around trespassing, we have a trespassing program where anybody who comes on your business can be trespassed and can't return. And we have a unit that specializes in doing this. They're called the Crime Reduction Unit, and they specialize in coming out and working with your business independently to do what's best for your business and help you come up with an action plan.
Thank you. Sheriff, the homelessness issue seems like a nationwide, coast-to-coast issue. Are you or is King County working with other state departments to solve or attempt to resolve this?
So King County is very invested in solutions regarding homelessness. In fact, they have awarded money to not only Burien, but I believe it's either Renton or I think it's Tukwila, and also just interested in helping people. So it is something that the county is invested in. We don't have anybody from another county department here to talk about it, but I can tell you it is important because it's an issue for our entire community. King County, state of Washington, and the entire nation. So, yes.
Thank you. Do you know when DESC is opening? This would be going to the chief and or the service providers. And will this alleviate the tent problem in our city?
I'm gonna go on a limb. Do you know the exact date on DESC? Is it next week? I'm gonna hand this down to Aaron. I think he's better.
So in addition to being the lead program director for South King County, I also sit on the Community Advisory Council for the DESC building. They are in the process right now of opening the place up to the very first residents. It doesn't like open up day one and everyone goes in at once, but in the next week or two, the first round of residents that were identified by law enforcement and service providers in Burien will be going into that space. There's a lot, I've been learning more. I'm not on the selection process myself, but there's a lot of considerations that go into selection, including making sure that people are eligible for the program and have that designator of having the disability. So when I spoke with people, it's significant. 30 people from Burien, that is significant. But there may be sectors where we don't see that immediately have an impact in that area. So I have cautioned that, but we are checking in and asking, we're having conversations with the ESC to understand a little bit better about the people who are on 152nd, the people who are downtown, who's eligible, who's not eligible, and what can we do to meet that need there.
Thank you. And last question.
Whoops, real quick, 2 points. One, I really want to shout out the city of Burien for pushing for the local priority, local preference in filling that building. That's a great model that I think is going to take off around the county, and it really came from city leaders. So great innovation. The other thing is the 30 is, we understand a floor, but not, okay, I think we might have disagreement, so I will educate myself later. But we've heard that the 30 is a floor, not a ceiling. So there may be more people from Burien. 30 is the minimum.
All right, thank you. And last question. This goes to the sheriff. How can we improve communication of facts to dispel misunderstandings and misinformation?
Well, that's what we hope tonight would provide, some information from the county. Now, sir, you're shaking your head, so you might not agree, but at least we have an opportunity to talk with the community, share information from our perspective, and I think it's, regardless, at the end of the day, we have to sit down, the city of Burien and the King County Sheriff's Office, because that's the only way we're gonna resolve this issue. So we have to do that. I will end by saying, we are willing, I am willing to do that, but with a mediator. We need somebody who is a disinterested party who can help bring the two sides to a resolution. At this point, the city has not taken me up on my offer for that. So, I just want to say we are interested in a resolution, trust me. I mean, I don't want this for your community. I don't want this for my officers. I want a resolution.
All right, thank you very much. And I think, please a round of applause for our panel. And on behalf of the King County Sheriff's Office in King County, thank you very much for coming this evening to hear more about this issue. Please be safe out there, and thank you.